Starting off this countdown, we have the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. This disaster is said to be the most serious nuclear accident in US history. It took place at the 3 Mile Island plant in Pennsylvania. At 4 a.m. on March 28, 1979, a number of equipment failures took place. A pressure valve in one of the reactors failed to close, so the cooling water contaminated with radiation was draining into other buildings. And then the control operators didn't know how to deal with this. And soon the reactor heated to over 4,000 degrees, and radioactive steam seeped out of the building. Although no deaths or injuries were reported, it's believed that this leak caused a number of cancers and infant deaths in the area. Of course, the company downplayed the event. They were like, oh, nothing really happened here, no radiation leaked out. But that's not the case. In the end, only pregnant women and small children were told to evacuate the area, but those that stayed suffered the consequences. Moving on to number 9, we have the Taylor Energy spill. If you guys are liking this video so far, then smash that like button for me, the Christmas cowgirl. Maybe you've heard of this, but chances are you haven't, because this oil spill was kept pretty hush-hush. Hardly anyone outside of Louisiana knew what went down. That's because they wanted to keep it all a secret in order to protect the company's reputation. Basically, back in 2004, an oil production platform sank in a mudslide after Hurricane Ivan struck. It said that 300 to 700 barrels of oil per day spewed from this site. This has been going on for more than 14 years. The spill was hidden for 6 of these years before an environmental group stumbled upon it and was like, what's going on here? Why is there oil seeping here? This is close to being one of the worst oil spills in US history. Like, millions of barrels have leaked into the Gulf of Mexico, polluting the waters. To be more precise, they estimated that the spill leaked 140 million gallons of oil, which is insane. In our 8th spot, we have Sellafield, UK. Back in the day during the Cold War, Sellafield was the site where weapon-grade nuclear material was produced for the UK's nuclear weapon program. However, in 1957, one of the Windscale piles caught on fire, and 11 tons of uranium was on fire for 3 days. As a result, radioactive material started spreading across the Lake District. It was deemed Britain's worst nuclear accident. On top of that, no one was evacuated and no one received iodine pills. Why? Well, workers were told to keep it all under wraps and to just keep working like nothing happened. Things continued on until they found out that like golf courses, milk, and chickens, among other things, were getting contaminated. That's when they were forced to tell the public about this. To this day, this place is considered one of the most radioactive places in the world. In our 7th spot, we have the Halifax explosion. This is said to be the deadliest industrial disaster in Canada. It occurred on December 6, 1917, when a cargo ship filled with war explosives collided with another ship in the Halifax harbor. The collision caused a massive explosion. 2,000 innocent people lost their lives. 9,000 were injured by the explosion and the flying debris and collapsing buildings. Others were killed by fires that scorched the area from the explosion. On top of that, a plume of black, thick smoke filled and polluted the air. Moving on to number 6, we have the reactive zone of Paris. During the 1920s to 1930s, a number of radioactive tests were done in this area. The test involved salts of radium-226. They were carried out safely until the French army decided to take over, and they ended up seriously contaminating the area, and they never disposed of the radioactive waste properly. In the 1990s, 61 barrels of cesium-137 and radium-226 were found stored there. On top of that, there was 160,000 gallons of contaminated soil. Over the years, the area has been decontaminated, or at least they tried to. It never really worked. And in 2006, more contaminated areas were found. The whole time, the area was so radioactive and the French army tried to keep it all a secret, but the people living nearby suffered. A high percentage of people living in the surrounding areas were found to have cancer. Although they denied that this site had anything to do with it, it seems quite obvious that it does. To this day, this place is considered the most radioactive zone on the planet. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the contaminated hospital. Back in September of 1987, 2 individuals broke into an abandoned hospital in Brazil. They then were going around taking some things, hoping that they could resell it and get some money. Some things that they stole were parts from a teletherapy unit. Little did they know that what they took home was highly radioactive. That night, the two men fell ill and began throwing up. Over the course of the next couple of days, things got worse. In fact, one of the men had his hand swell and he had to get it partially amputated. But they didn't know what was making them sick. Plus, they didn't really want to tell people like, oh hey, we broke into a hospital and stole some stuff, so they kept it all a secret. And then one of the guys actually dismantled this radioactive object and was like, oh, what do we have in here? He ended up spreading cesium over a large area. As a result, 4 people died and 250 others were injured from exposure to the radioactive materials. A total of 112,000 people were exposed to the radioactive material. On top of that, the men's homes were demolished because they were so contaminated, and a number of other areas had to be decontaminated. To this day, this is said to be one of the world's worst nuclear disasters and one of the world's worst radiological incidents. In our 4th spot, we have the Exxon Valdez oil spill. On March 24th, 1989, one of the worst man-made disasters in US history took place. So on this day, an oil tanker owned by Exxon Shipping Company spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil into Prince William Sound. So just after midnight that day, the ship hit a reef. The collision caused the ship's hull to tear open and all that oil spilled into the water. Turns out that the captain of Exxon Valdez was drinking at the time of this event and also was not qualified to steer such a massive ship. This spill impacted 13,000 miles of coastline. It killed hundreds of thousands of birds, otters, seals, whales, you name it. Even to this day, this area is still heavily polluted. And to think it could have been easily avoided had they had a different captain of the ship. And most like the other disasters on this list, the company tried to keep it all hush-hush, but in the end, the truth revealed itself. Coming in at number 3, we have the North Korea nuclear accident. North Korea is a very secretive country. It's hard to know what really goes on there. What we do know though is that North Korea is openly creating nukes and missiles and experimenting with these nuclear weapons. According to a number of articles, one of these tests in 2017 didn't go so well. 200 nuclear workers were killed at Kim Jong-un's testing facility. Basically, they're doing so much nuclear testing that the ground just can't take it anymore. I mean, in 2018, a mountain collapsed after more nuclear testing. But anyways, in this case, an unfinished tunnel collapsed, killing 100 workers. Then 100 more workers died after trying to rescue the first group. Now, this disaster is nowhere near as bad as Chernobyl, but I put this on this list because experts are scared and have predicted that in the future, the nuclear testing facility will most likely crumble. And when it does, a radioactive leak will occur, and it's said to be even worse than Chernobyl. So they're on the path to a very bad nuclear explosion or leak. In our 2nd spot, we have the Bhopal disaster, also referred to as the Bhopal gas tragedy. This was a gas leak that occurred on the night of December 2nd to the morning of December 3rd in 1984. It occurred at the Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant in Bhopal, India. Apparently, the pipes were lacking routine maintenance, and that caused a backflow of water into a tank containing methyl isocyanate gas. That's what caused this gas leak. This is said to be one of the world's worst industrial disasters. Over 500,000 people were exposed to this gas. It seeped into the towns surrounding the plant. It said that the death toll was 2,259, but later it was revealed to be much higher, with 3,787 deaths. Some even believe it was up to 8,000 deaths, but the government is concealing the true number of deaths from this tragedy. On top of that, over 500,000 people were left injured, including nearly 4,000 permanent injuries. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Kishtim disaster. On September 29, 1957, an explosion occurred at a plutonium production site for nuclear weapons and nuclear fuel reprocessing plant in Russia. It was built during the late 1940s as part of a Soviet program to develop nuclear weapons. It was a secret facility that people did not know about. Well, on that day, the cooling system containing radioactive waste failed and No one even noticed. The waste started to heat up and eventually exploded at 350 degrees Celsius. 20 million curies of radioactive material flung into the sky. It got picked up by the wind and spread over an area of 20,000 square kilometers. 270,000 people were living in the affected areas. And what's worse is that the Soviet government refused to let people know what happened. No one evacuated and hundreds of people died from the radioactivity of the area. Hundreds of others suffered from radiation sickness. It wasn't until 1989 did the Soviet government acknowledge what happened. At least in Chernobyl, people were told what went down and then were forced to evacuate. Alright.
Number 10. Black holes, incredibly scary, incredibly dark. And although that clip may not seem that scary, black holes are indeed terrifying considering what little we truly know about them. Not to mention, researchers believe there are roughly about 10 million of them in our solar system. I know our solar system is huge, but researching this, I didn't know there was 10 million of them coming for us. This is actual footage from the Hubble telescope in 2015. Black holes suck anything and everything in with their gravitational pull and emit enormous amounts of energy. No one even knows what's inside of one because, well, no one has been able to be sucked in one and come back to Earth and tell us all about it. So before we get into number 9, make sure you guys hit the like button on this video. It really helps us out. And head over to my Instagram at Atlanta Productions because as soon as I get a hold of PlayStation 5s, I'm going to be doing giveaways. I'm going to try to get my hands on 5 of them. So make sure to go follow me at Atlanta Productions. And look for this contest picture and just tell me what games would you guys play. Alright, moving right along, number 9.
But you'd feel their effect if they were to hit the planet.
Okay, what is that?
Gamma ray bursts, or GRBs, are the most violent explosions in the universe.
So these things can happen when two neutron stars collide or when a black hole swallows one of the stars, but however it happens, life on Earth would not be able to survive gamma rays. Even just 1 second of these rays could do enough damage to wipe out the Earth. But luckily they're said to only happen in like once in every 10 million years. So the only question is, did one happen over 10 million years ago? Because are we due? Are we due for one? I don't think so. I'm hoping not. Next up, number 8.
The 1918 flu killed 675,000 Americans. 50 to 100 million people died worldwide.
Of course we have to throw this one on here. Well, pandemics are a serious way to wipe out the Earth. I mean, I feel like the Earth is being wiped out right now. A lot of us had a history lesson this year from the 1919 Spanish flu, and it's so crazy that 100 years later, it's happening again. And I'm not even sure if the Spanish flu shut down the entire world like how the world is being shut down today. I mean, when we're like 50 years from now, this is gonna be in our grandkids' history books. Absolutely insane that we're around for this. I mean, we were there for the 2008 recession. We're there for COVID-19. This is like a really hard lifetime, especially if you're from the 90s. We're going through a lot. And although most pandemics are said to be natural disasters, one thing this year has made us question is if this was a man-made pandemic. Is someone out there trying to control the population? Is biological warfare a real thing? I'm moving right along in at number 7. Okay, what you just saw is a clip from a tsunami in Japan. This really happened. Tsunamis aren't anything new, but with climate change becoming more and more devastating to our home on Earth, if sea levels continue to rise because of ice melting globally, we could see a lot of our world underwater. It would definitely wipe out humanity and the entire Earth would become a modern day Atlantis. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't hold my breath for that long. Like after like 10 seconds, I'm tapping out. Number 6. Okay, you guessed it. it's an asteroid. I mean, not too crazy to think this could wipe out Earth, since it's been said to have been done before. You guys know about the dinosaurs, the dinos? Yeah, they were wiped out by an asteroid.
They now can't see what's headed their way, but they can feel it.
Number 5.
Right now, in the United States, one of the world's largest volcanoes is gearing up to explode. It's known as the Yellowstone volcano. And it's not just any regular volcano. Nope.
Okay, we all know that the Earth has many volcanoes, but there are some massive mountains that are ready to explode, and if they do, all of humanity would wipe out from the devastation. It may not be by melting everyone, but it would cause serious effects on our food crops, and it would block out the sun for several years. Is this real life right now? That would be an alternate reality. And moving along in at number 4, solar flares in today's world would seriously affect humans if one occurred again that was big enough. The last solar flare in 1859 ended up interfering with small-scale electronics. I mean, in today's society, we rely heavily on electronics for access. Think money to buy food, cars, news, media. I mean, we use it for communications. We use it right now to watch me. We could potentially be taken back hundreds of years to the dark ages and no way to Google ourselves out of it. I mean, a world without Google. I remember a few years without Google. Okay, no, I was too young, but I just can't imagine. Every single day, I'm like asking questions to Google that I need answers to. Tonight, I'm going home and I'm gonna ask Google what happens if there is no Google. Coming at number 3. Okay, so this one isn't exactly a natural disaster, but I had to put it on this list because it is very, very possible. Nuclear war. Considering countries having nuclear weapons, this is a pretty scary reality. A full-scale nuclear war would kill hundreds of millions of people directly, and the aftermath would do irreparable damages to the Earth. Nuclear winter is when the soot from the blast covers the Earth and effectively freezes it over. But these are all theories, and I don't want to personally live through one to find out what would really happen. Number 2, the sun. Well, this one looks happy and cute. I mean, it's depicted as a little baby here. Can anyone guess what show this is from? Leave your guesses in the comment section below. But in all seriousness, the sun is not a baby. In fact, it's really old. It's hella old. And an expanding sun would be the most disastrous way for humanity to end. We don't want Mr. Sun to get any bigger.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to roast!
The idea of an expanding sun is that it grows bigger as time passes on. The sun getting bigger means it would be in closer proximity to Earth, which would scorch us. I mean, you guys remember this scene from the Terminator? Alright, in at number 1, take a look at this clip. Overpopulation is a very real natural disaster that we're kind of living through right now. It is estimated that the Earth will be home to 10 billion people by 2050. We will still be alive. I mean, 2050, that's only about 30 years from now. The problem and why it all puts all of humanity at risk is because the Earth isn't getting any bigger and we're using up resources faster than ever before. If we can't feed our population or house our population, I mean, we're gonna be in pretty big trouble. Especially if one of these pandemics happen again, human beings can sometimes be the real virus.
Humans identify the closest with the virus. We expand non-stop and we have no stable means of not destroying ourselves without expanding to a new planet. It is not a question of what we do, it's a question of what we are.
Going on for number 10 now, we have the Challenger disaster. This space shuttle had many successful missions in the 1980s and it gained a lot of attention for its 10th mission on January 28, 1986. One of the reasons was that it was to carry America's first teacher in space, Krista McAuliffe. Because of this, millions of people, including school children, were watching the launch live to see the historic event. Just over a minute into the shuttle's launch, as the world watched, a burning gas failure caused the shuttle to explode and disintegrate. It's thought that the crew may have survived the initial explosion, but not the resulting impact with the ocean below. 17% of all Americans watched the disaster live, and many people will tell you exactly where they were on that fateful day. Coming at number 9 now, we have Columbia. The Space Shuttle Columbia was one of NASA's flagship spacecrafts. In 2003, it had already flown 27 successful missions to space. However, the 28th was to be its last. During the launch on February 1st, a piece of foam insulation broke off from the shuttle's external tank and stuck into its wing. NASA managers played down the damage and said there was nothing that could be done anyway. Upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, hot gas burst through the shuttle's wing, causing it to become unstable and break apart. All 7 astronauts were killed, and NASA suspended its launches for 2 years while an investigation was launched. Coming at number 8 now, we have the Vostok explosion. On March 18th, 1980, the Soviet Union was preparing to launch a rocket-carrying IKAR, a military spy satellite. At the time, the Soviet press reported it as a success. We now know that is far from the truth. Sometime before launch, the rocket exploded on its pad, blowing up 300 tons of rocket fuel that incinerated the whole area. The blast killed 48 soldiers, and many more were left with horrific burns. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Spaceship Two. This spaceplane was Virgin Galactic's main foray into commercial space travel. On Halloween 2014, co-pilot Michael Olsbury unlocked the shuttle's feathering system too early during a test flight over California's Mojave Desert. The system is supposed to be used to ensure a safe descent, but it was deployed while the craft was still ascending. It disintegrated 2 seconds later, killing one pilot and injuring the other. The co-pilot was cited as partially to blame for the crash, but the ship's designers were also faulted for not creating a fail-safe system. The crash sparked a lot of debate about the safety of commercial spaceflight after decades of it being conducted by governments. Alright, next up at the number 6 spot now, we have Apollo 1. Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon as part of the Apollo 11 mission, but as you might expect, there were 10 previous space missions that were part of that project. The first one, Apollo 1, was a space disaster. As the crew went through the checklist before their launch, an electrical fault sparked a fire in their command module. In a matter of seconds, it burned them alive, causing death by asphyxiation. The inquiry that followed found lethal design flaws with the Apollo 1 module. If there is any silver lining to take from this story, it's that these safety improvements helped Apollo 11 successfully land on the moon 2 years later. Alright, coming at number 5 now, we have Soyuz 1. At the height of the space race with the US, the Soviet Union launched Soyuz 1, a capsule manned by cosmonaut Vladimir Komov. To put it quite simply, it wasn't ready. The engineers who built the craft knew it wasn't ready, the management team knew it wasn't ready, even Vladimir himself probably knew it wasn't ready. The craft had failed 3 earlier unmanned tests, not a single one succeeded. Still, the government put so much pressure on them that the launch went ahead anyway. Amazingly, Vladimir managed to reach space, but the problems had already reached critical levels. The whole shuttle was basically breaking and the mission was aborted. Vladimir then had to manually re-enter Earth's atmosphere, which he survived, but disaster struck when the craft's parachute failed to deploy. It slammed into the ground at high speed, instantly killing Vladimir. For many people, this marked the Soviet Union losing the race to the moon. Alright, at the number 4 spot now, we have the Netherlands catastrophe. This one is frankly astonishing, but the reason most of us in the West haven't heard about it is because it was a Soviet disaster from 1960 at the height of the Cold War, so it was kept tightly under wraps. Now we know the full story. On October 24th, 1960, the Soviet Union was testing an intercontinental missile using rocket technology. It was a 30-meter long, 141-ton missile called the R-16. As it sat on the launch pad, a short circuit caused the rocket's engines to fire accidentally. The fuel tanks blew up in a huge explosion. The fireball incinerated all of the nearby crew. In total, 78 people were killed and a further 120 were injured. The Soviet Union did not even acknowledge the event had happened for another 29 years. Alright, moving on to number 3 now, we have the Xichang disaster. In the 90s, American engineers were being forced to attach their satellites to foreign shuttle launches because of the ban on commercial payloads following the Challenger disaster we discussed earlier. One of these launches was near the small Chinese town of Xichang. The satellite was attached to the untested Chinese Long March March 3B rocket. An error in the rocket's onboard timing system meant that it began to arc way too soon. The 426-ton missile flew for 22 seconds over a valley with buildings and people in before slamming into the side of a hill. The huge explosion sent shockwaves throughout the whole area. The Chinese government said that 6 people were killed, but international observers said that area had not been properly evacuated and as many as 500 people may have died in the disaster. Coming at number 2 now, we have the X-15. This was a joint project between NASA and the US Air Force for an aircraft that could skim just below the surface of space. The test flight took place on November 15, 1967 and was piloted by Michael J. Adams. The craft successfully reached its peak altitude of 266,000 feet and began to pull a rocking maneuver on board so that the camera could scan the horizon. Unfortunately, this rocking sent the craft into a spin and then a nosedive. It reached speeds of 160,000 feet per minute and broke up during the descent, killing Adams in the process. And finally at number 1 now, we have Soyuz 11. On June 7, 1971, the Soviet Union's Soyuz 11 space shuttle arrived at a space station on a routine mission. 3 weeks later, they left to return to Earth. 12 minutes into their descent, a faulty ventilation valve opened while the capsule was still 104 miles above Earth. The 3 crew members suffocated to death almost immediately. The strange thing is, the ground crew had no idea anything was wrong at all. It wasn't until they opened the capsule that they found the 3 cosmonauts were dead and didn't know the cause of death until a full autopsy. Although they were on their way back to Earth, the fatal accident occurred in space, making these 3 men the only human beings known to have died in space.